You're listening to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, featuring guests who take the scientific talk about food and break it down for practical use. You've heard the phrase, "You are what you eat." Come find out what that really means. Experience conversations with experts in the field of nutrition and understand the power of food for our health, well-being, and beyond. Now, here's your host, registered dietitian and nutritionist, Mathea Ford.
Hi there, it's Mathea. Welcome back to the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast featuring nutrition experts who are leading the way using food starts today, right now, with our next guest. It's great to have Carina Venter on the show today. Carina, welcome to Nutrition Experts.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. And there's so much misinformation about food allergy out there that I'm quite excited to be part of this podcast to at least try and answer some of the questions or perhaps correct some of the misconceptions out there.
Great. I'm excited to have you on the show and share your expertise about allergies with my audience, because I think it's one of the things that there's a lot of information that unless you've put it all together, it's probably hard to parse out the right things. So tell my listeners a little more about you and what you do.
So my official title is Assistant Professor in Allergy and Immunology, Department of Pediatrics at the University of Colorado. But I do consider myself an Allergy Specialist Dietitian. I studied my first degree in dietetics in South Africa, where I am originally from. I then moved to the United Kingdom, where I did a Post Graduate Diploma and my PhD in Allergy and Immunology. After that, we moved to Cincinnati, where I did 2.5 years focusing on eosinophilic esophagitis, a particular type of food allergy. And then I'm now located in Denver, where we're definitely planning to stay for the long term, working in the area of food allergy prevention again, which really is my passion.
In case the audience didn't notice, you specialize in food allergies. So what got you interested in that specific area? What made you want to get your degrees in allergens and immunology, that type of stuff?
I actually was a dietitian who loved working in nutrition support and, in the intensive care units. But it so happened that we moved to the Isle of Wight, where my husband got a position as a physical therapist. And the allergy specialist dietitian resigned, because of her age, and they needed to replace her. And so they asked me if I'd be happy, to cover the food allergy clinics, which I very reluctantly agreed to. But as my nature is, after about the third clinic, really not understanding anything the doctor was saying about sensitization, but not clinical allergy, and clinical allergy in the absence of sensitization and desensitization, I decided to enroll into the master's degree in food allergy at the University of Southampton. And I just totally fell in love with it. I happen to have sisters with many different kinds of food allergies, also nieces and nephews with allergies. So it's definitely been something that I've seen in my whole family, in my own family, experienced in my own family. But once I started to learn more about all the mechanisms involved in allergy, I just totally fell in love, and I haven't ever looked back.
So let's talk about, in general, how are food allergies diagnosed? Because I know people sometimes say they have a food allergy, sometimes they say they have an intolerance. What is kind of the difference, and how are they diagnosed?
Broadly speaking, there are two types of allergies, particularly in terms of food allergy. So we have the immediate type food allergies, which we refer to as IgE mediated food allergies. And they normally occur within 2 hours of eating the food, but normally it happens quite quickly, 5 to 20 minutes. For these allergies, we do have tests, either a skin prick test or we can do a blood test, the specific IgE test. But these tests really should be interpreted by an allergist. So I'd say my one crucial message I want to get across today is don't self-diagnose. If you think you've got a food allergy, you need to get the appropriate testing done, and it needs to be done and interpreted by an allergist. Then we have the non-IgE mediated allergies, which are more the delayed type. They have very complex names, such as eosinophilic esophagitis, which is really over time, food allergens causing inflammation in the esophagus, and the children start having problems with growth filtering, they can't swallow, and they may have abdominal pain, really depending on their age. These types of allergies or eosinophilic esophagitis can only be diagnosed by an endoscopy done by a gastroenterologist. So, and some testing may or may not be performed by an allergist. It's normally a team approach looking after these kids. So bottom line, or adults, again, if you think you may have one of these swallowing problems or allergies causing swallowing problems, get to see an allergist and a gastroenterologist, get a good diagnosis, which they can then manage with diet and medication. The other types of non-IgE food allergies are called food protein induced enterocolitis. I'm fascinated by the disease. I see many of these young infants in clinic. I absolutely love dealing with these families. And that is really profuse vomiting caused occurring about 2 hours after eating atypical foods. So things like rice or mango or banana. It's also caused in some cases by milk or soy milk. And the children often end up in the ER because they get totally dehydrated and need to get IV fluid. So that's sort of like the two main non-IgE mediated diseases. Then we get other kinds of non-IgE mediated allergies affecting the gut. Some people call them enteropathies. Some refer to as intolerances. But really using the word intolerance in these cases is incorrect because they are mediated and caused by the immune system. And so really we should be talking perhaps about delayed type milk allergies or delayed type egg allergies opposed to milk intolerances. I don't actually deal that much with intolerances, but the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, or NIAID, as we refer to in the United States, clearly say that these are foods triggering symptoms, which is not mediated by the immune system. That could be perhaps foods causing irritable bowel syndrome, or it could be foods causing lactose intolerance. But we don't typically deal with these cases in an allergy clinic. So we see the broad spectrum of the immediate and delayed type allergies.
So you mentioned food protein. I didn't hear the rest of that. Food protein type of allergies. What was that?
Yeah. Food protein induced enterocolitis syndrome. We have abbreviations. Some people call it FBIES and some call it FIPIES, but it's basically FBIES, food protein induced enterocolitis syndrome. It can be very, very distressing for mothers dealing with this. You can imagine the first time you give your baby rice, or the second or even the third time, and this child just starts vomiting and just do not stop until eventually you end up in the ER. So a lot of food fear and delayed introduction of foods in these families that we have to deal with, and quite understandably so.
So what are the allergies that in the United States, for example, that we put on labels that are the most common?
So we have the 8 main allergens in the United States. And now this is going to be a test for me because I always seem to forget 1 or 2. But here we go. It's milk, egg, wheat, soy, and then crustacean shellfish. So not mollusks, but crustacean shellfish, then normal fish, and then peanuts and tree nuts. Quite interestingly, the list of tree nuts is the longest list I've ever seen in the world, with number of foods or things listed as tree nuts, like that we probably would never eat. But one of the problems is that coconut is also on this list of tree nuts. I think the FDA are currently thinking about removing this because we do not see coconut allergies amongst the tree nut allergies in clinic. And so I spend a lot of time explaining to patients that may be allergic to 1 or 2 tree nuts or even all the tree nuts, that even though coconut is clearly indicated as an allergen on food labels, we do not consider it to be a main allergen, and they can safely consume these.
So how are those diagnosed? Just by going to the allergist, or like you said, going to the ER and then going through a medical kind of, is it more of an elimination, or is it, you mentioned the IgE mediated ones have blood tests, but the other ones don't?
The other ones don't. There is no blood test that's going to tell you have eosinophilic esophagitis triggered by milk, and there's no blood test that can tell you that you've got this FBIES triggered by oat. So it's basically, in terms of eosinophilic disease, we do the endoscopy, we confirm that this is what they have, And then we can take either milk or wheat out of the diet. Sometimes we take milk, egg, wheat, and soy out, or we could do milk, egg, wheat, soy, peanuts, and tree nuts. So it's either 2 foods, 4 foods, or 6 foods. Some doctors start at the 2 and then do 4 and then 6 if needed. Some start at the 6. We clearly have a very in-depth discussion with families to find out from them as well. Do they want to start with 2 or perhaps just 1, in which case it will be milk, or do they want to start, taking 6 out? And then we take the foods out for about 6 to 8 weeks. We do a repeat endoscopy to see if the eosinophils have gone down. We normally count them in a microscope, and if they're less than 15 in the area that we can see, we call it a high power field, but less than 15 in that area, we say that we've got remission and we've got control of the disease. And then the difficulties start, because then we put the foods back one at a time. And again, depending on the gastroenterologist and the allergist, we probably would do an endoscopy 6 weeks after we put each food back to see if that is the food that's causing the inflammation, or whether it's perhaps milk and wheat triggering it. Clinically, I just want to say that quite often, we start putting milk back in the kids' diet, and the endoscopy is booked for 6 to 8 weeks from now. But after about 3 or 4 days, those kids really get unwell. They start vomiting again, not as profusely as the kids with the FPIs. They get tummy ache, they lose all appetite, in which case we may not just do an endoscopy straight away. We just say, let's take milk out again. You're clearly highly symptomatic. And we're not going to put the child through the trauma of having 6 weeks off of food that's clearly making him unwell. So sometimes, and a lot of the time in allergy, it's what the textbooks say, and then there's the clinical common sense. And I'd say we definitely work closely with our families to see what's best. So that's the eosinophilic disease. And then for the FPIs, it's really just a medical diagnosis. We ask which food they ate. We clearly saw the symptoms. We get the report from the ER. We would not then suggest that they go try the food at home again. Normally, if we're convinced that it was oat or soy or milk, we would avoid it for about 6 months. And then we always bring them back and introduce that food in hospital, because it is not something you want a mom to do at home and get the kid, severely ill. We normally put IV fluids into the arms of the kids when they come in to get the food reintroduced. And again, the 6 months could be 12 months. It could be 3 months. It really just depends on each case. So no blood tests for the non-IgE ones. And for the IgE ones, the immediate ones, we have a blood test or skin test, but always needs to be interpreted by an allergist. A positive test does not confirm an allergy without having a good history taken by an allergist.
What concerns should the public have about the food allergies? Are they increasing? What is going on?
Food allergies are definitely increasing. I think, I've published a lot in this area. I think the kind of food allergy and whether that particular food allergy is increasing is country dependent. So our data in the United Kingdom showed that food allergy tripled in kids born in 1989 versus kids born in 1997. But then it seemed to plateau looking at our kids born in 2001. And that's really the beauty from the Isle of Wight, is because we have these cohorts of children that we can follow up over generations. So that's data from the United Kingdom. Whereas in the States, it seems that peanut allergy is still increasing. We're beginning to see more sesame allergy in the United Kingdom. We've been dealing with lupin allergy in Europe a lot. Lupin is a beautiful purple flower, and they mix the seed of this purple flower and they put it in flour when they make pastries or bread, because it makes it light and puffy. So we've been seeing a lot of lupin allergy in Europe. When I worked and lived there, we never saw lupin allergy in the United States when I first arrived here 4 years ago. But you can now buy bread in the normal bread aisle in King Soopers that's got lupin in. So we're now beginning to think, are we going to see more lupin allergies? Should we start testing these kids for lupin allergies? So it's increasing, but I think it's very country specific what we should be concerned about. Also, interestingly, I was in Thailand last week, where wheat allergy is the biggest problem. And we almost never see immediate type wheat allergy in the United Kingdom. You'd get 1 out of 1,000 kids. And it's also probably not one of our main concerns in food allergy clinics in children in the United States, even though we see it. So again, very much country specific, with wheat allergy rates escalating at the moment in Thailand. So what should the public be concerned about? I think I spent my life telling pregnant women or mothers that they haven't done anything wrong, and there was nothing else they could have eaten, and there was nothing that they should not have eaten. It clearly lies in the food we eat, okay? But we don't really know whether it's because we're eating more ultra-processed food, or perhaps because we eat more barbecued foods. I can tell you all the immune interactions of eating all these foods, and when we do mouse models, we get beautiful data showing perhaps we should eat less burgers, but we just don't have that data in humans. So I think what I would like to say is there's definitely an answer in food, but we just don't know what the answer is. The one answer we definitely have about food, and a good friend of mine, George Tutui, did the LEAP study, learning early about peanut in the United Kingdom, where they clearly showed that introduction of peanut in the first year of life prevent peanut allergy. And so, of course, from that followed the NIAID guidelines, of which I was one of the panel members, with instructions. If you want to read more about it, we will talk about my blog a bit later, but it's on my blog or on the NIAID website about how to introduce peanuts in the infant's first year of life. For parents that's really concerned, they may have another kid with a peanut allergy, or they may just be concerned about allergies full stop. They can always go and see their primary care physician or an allergist that could help facilitate this introduction of peanut. But that's the one fact we have, is that you give peanuts early in the first year of life, and you continue to eat it, and you prevent peanut allergy up to the age of 5. It doesn't affect other food allergies. So you can eat as many peanuts as you like. It's not going to stop you from developing eczema or egg allergy or rhinitis, unfortunately. So I think, allergen specific, we've made a big U-turn. We used to be scared of giving these allergenic foods to young kids. We're not scared anymore. We actively advocate early introduction of peanut. And in terms of the other ones, we say, once you commence weaning, get the allergens in. We can't set a clock to say fish has to be in by 7 months and egg has to be in by 8. But definitely once you start with the weaning foods, these foods should not be avoided without any good reasons. And as the family eat these foods, it should be introduced in the infant's diet. So really, pregnancy, I have no advice at the moment. Breastfeeding, I'd say, please breastfeed for as long as you can. But I can't tell the breastfeeding mom how to change her diet to make her breast milk any better for prevention of allergies. And then we have the early life where we know we need to get the allergens in, but other than the peanut-specific data, we don't have other really good studies to refer to.
So what is it that makes introducing peanut early avoid the peanut allergy?
So, I think if I can put it in non-immunological terms, it's sort of like just saying to the immune system, it is okay, it's not a foreign antigen like, some other bug that it has to fight. Actually, we the same immune system that fights worm infestations causes allergies. So it's really almost like saying to the immune system, it's okay. You can digest and absorb it. This is not a worm trying to, come and live in your intestines. But on a more scientific level, when children have eczema, particularly the children with eczema, they have a lot of inflammation in their skin. And if they come across their allergen via their skin, the immune cells that drive that reaction is almost always I want to say causing allergies. It's perhaps a strong word to say cause, but what we're trying, but if you eat the food via the oral route and the allergen gets into your gut, the immune system that's driving that is a tolerogenic immune system, as we call it. So one that says, it's okay, let's digest and absorb. So the reason we want to get allergens into children early is because by getting it via the oral route into them rather than via their skin is going to help them to tolerate the food and not be allergic. And so the LEAP study was really done in children with eczema. So we have good data. But when we had to write the NIAID guidelines, it was that huge discussion about, so is this relevant for kids with eczema only, or are we going to say all kids need to get the allergens in? And pretty much all the guidelines across the world is now in agreement that it's not just the kids with eczema. Every kid that we see, we'd like to get the allergens in and keep it in, and particularly in relation to peanut. But again, on my website, I have got very practical guidance on how to feed peanut and then what to do with the allergens. How do we get egg and soy and fish into young infants?
I was going to ask you, is avoidance the primary way we prevent food allergies? But it sounds like that's not the right way.
And actually, it's fascinating because where I started my career on the Isle of Wight, in Europe, they often refer to it as the Mecca of allergy prevention. And of course, we did the very first study in the world where we told pregnant and breastfeeding women to avoid or to exclude the allergens from their diet, and then not to give the allergens in the first year of life. And that is now almost 30 years ago. So, and it didn't work. And so, we've come a long way in the allergy world where we're now saying we don't want to avoid, we want to eat. And getting back to the pregnant women as well as much, and the breastfeeding women, the advice is not as clear as to say you must eat allergens, but we do clearly say don't avoid. So we've definitely stepped away from don't avoid anything because you think it will cause allergy. Having said that, I say to the pregnant ladies that I see, if you absolutely detest peanut and you cannot eat it, then the evidence is not good enough to say you must eat peanut. It's okay. If you cannot eat it and you don't like it, let's wait until the guidance is strong enough to say you really should be eating peanut.
So is it normal for a child or a person with one allergy to have multiple allergies?
I think that is one of the biggest debates in the world. So clinically, I'd say we see more and more kids with more than one allergy. We're also trying to put a case series together where, we used to see kids with EOE, the eosinophilic disease, and then we used to see the kids that's got FBIs, and then we used to see the kids with the immediate type allergies. Now we're beginning to see one child that's got all three. So they may have this eosinophilic disease, the inflammation in the esophagus caused by milk. They may have immediate type peanut allergy, and they may have this profuse vomiting or FBIs caused by oat. And so not only do we see more and more kids with multiple food allergies, we see all these multiple immune reactions within one child, which we don't think we used to see before. The problem with prevalence data is that, and I've done that myself, so now you have a 1-year-old that's got, a peanut and an egg and a soy and perhaps a wheat allergy. And to publish your data, you have to put these kids through blinded challenges, which means 2 challenges for every food. So to really put a kid through 8 challenges, just so you can count them once in a paper, is ethically, I don't think acceptable. And so like in my studies, I might have done the milk and the egg challenges blind. And so I had really good data to show this kid has got a milk and egg allergy. We also put in the paper that we think they've got a soy and wheat allergy, but because we didn't bring them in for these blinded challenges, scientifically it was not good enough. And so I think this is why we just don't have good enough studies where we've put these poor kids with multiple food allergies through all these very many challenges. But clinically, definitely, we see more and more kids with more than one allergy and more than one immune mechanism driving all the different ones.
And so why do you think that they have multiple allergies instead of, like you said, they can get 3 different kinds of allergies type thing?
I think, 2 of the things that I'm looking at the moment, and many other people are doing much better work than me, is really understanding the microbiome and, and how the microbiome is driving this cascade of immune diseases. So it may, again, coming back to the food we eat, that may be affecting the microbiome, which is leading to just more like I almost want to say an overactive immune system. And then the other thing also is that clearly, with this rise in allergies seen in the last 20 years, we know genetically humans haven't changed, but epigenetically we might have changed. And so again, in simple terms, proteins and carbohydrates can slightly change your DNA. So we don't change your genetics, but we do change sort of like, let's say, carbohydrate tails or perhaps protein tails that attach themselves to the gene. It's a very simplistic way of saying this. And that has definitely changed over the years. And so that may silence some of your genes, or it may actually make some of your genes more active. And we think that once again could be leading to this overactive immune system. There's many things that can affect your epigenetics and your microbiome other than food. It could be air pollution. Some of my colleagues are actually just looking at the vapors that you inhale from your sofa and how that affects your epigenetics. Your obesity levels, that can affect your epigenetics, and it affects the same signals in many ways as the ones causing allergies. So it's really where we sit, what we breathe in, what we eat, how active we are, how obese we are. So there's many different factors that we have to take into account when we try and figure out why do we see more allergies, why are they more complex, and why are they perhaps more severe.
So thinking about parents of maybe young children wanting to either avoid allergies or prevent food allergies, how do they go about doing that? And I know you mentioned some early introduction stuff, but are there any other ways that you can prevent or avoid food allergies showing up?
This is what I would say to the family. I would say to the pregnant woman, I am hoping that one day I'll prove just healthy eating in pregnancy helps prevent allergies. And so I think in terms of pregnancy diet, eat as healthy as you can. And if you have morning sickness and you can only eat dry toast for 3 months, then it's okay, but try and get on a healthy diet as soon as you can. I say breastfeed. There's low and little evidence to say that breastfeeding per se prevents allergies, but it's more protective or positive than negative, and we always want moms to breastfeed. Then the other interesting thing is, and we don't have these trials completed or very conclusive data, is that we have to moisturize the skin of children. Because I explained to you that when they have eczema and they come in contact with the allergens, it can cause allergies. So we now say, look after your baby's skin and let's moisturize well. And so whether that needs to be creams or emollients or whether just putting some oil on it, we're still studying, but definitely look after your baby's skin and discuss how to do that with an allergist or dermatologist in this case. And then we say don't introduce solids before 4 months, but from 4 months on, if the baby's ready to eat, start introducing solid foods. When they've had 1 or 2 foods, then that is when we start introducing the peanut. And when we've got them established on peanuts for about 2 weeks, then you can start introducing the other allergens. Getting back to the peanut, for the kids with eczema, we have sort of like strict advice where we say try to get the peanuts in 3 times a week in a dose of 2 grams of peanut protein. It's about the heaped teaspoon of peanut butter to make it simple, but if they want exact dosaging, they can again go on the NIAID website, or they can go on my website where I've explained that, my blog. So that's the peanut. Then we get the allergens in. Something else, and I'm just writing my paper. It's lying right here next to me. We have one study published by Caroline Rodet from a multi-center study in Europe where they showed that diet diversity, so the more different foods kids eat in the first year of life, the less likely they are to develop food allergy, in particular in this one study. My data is sort of like indicating the same, but I still have to go through peer review and my paper needs to get accepted. But so I also say to the parents is don't be scared of food. We've started weaning. Now we've done the allergens, but keep the diet varied, and once again, many kids have, as we call it in England, fatty eating behavior, or in America, they call about picky eating. I say, don't get in a stress because they won't eat tomato. It's okay. But if they love food, then feed the variety of foods that they like and love, as often as you can. And don't forget that sometimes a kid has to eat foods up to, depending on the paper you look at, 13 to 20 times before they will accept the food. So no kid tastes spinach for the first time and think this is amazing. They're going to pull their faces and spit it out. But persevere, unless you've given it at least 20 times, don't give up. So I think, because I like to give parents a positive message about what to give and what to focus on. On a more negative side, we could perhaps say, don't give too much commercial baby foods because they're sterile. So there's no natural microbial load on the food. There's not such a diverse range of food. We could say, don't give your kid too much fried foods, because our mouse model data show that giving too much fried foods can negatively affect the immune system. But rather than giving them a list of what not to do, I really try and focus on the good things in life and the things that we know more about. And then after the first year of life, there's nothing much we know. There's some limited data showing that kids who eat a Mediterranean lifestyle diet have less wheeze and asthma, but it's not really been shown for things like eczema, food allergy, or rhinitis. So again, healthy eating, Mediterranean style eating, if they love tomatoes, feed that to them. Use olive oil if you can. If they love fish, give it to them. If they don't like it, keep offering it. So that's the kind of things that I think families can do. I'm not an expert in what we call environmental allergens. So some people say having a dog is a good thing, but that's not my area of expertise, so I wouldn't venture onto that.
You're just all about the food.
Yes, and I love my dog, so I'd like to think dogs are allergy preventative, but like I say, it's not my expertise. Yeah,
dogs are good for more than allergy prevention, so yeah.
Definitely.
So you mentioned a little bit, but what other research is promising in this area of food allergies that maybe people should be aware of and be on the lookout for?
I'm not myself involved in these studies, but my boss, as I call him, Dr. David Fleischer, is very involved, as are many allergists around the world that I know, in what we call OIT, or oral immunotherapy studies. So this may be a kid with a peanut allergy or a wheat allergy. Having said that, I have been involved in some of the trials. So we will give them graded peanut introduction in the hospital up to a certain dose. And then we will ask them to go home and to continue to eat that amount of peanut, let's say for 2 to 4 weeks or 6 months or 12 months, depending on the clinical practice and the study. Then they come into hospital and we give them a little bit higher dose and another little bit higher dose, and they go home and they continue eating that. So that over time, we can gradually induce tolerance to this food, either the egg or the wheat or the peanut. There are many private practicing allergists that's already doing this. Where I'm based and most academic centers, we're only doing it as part of research studies. We're not really just bringing kids into clinic and feed them these allergens, because, there are risks involved in doing this, and the majority of children that go through these trials of introduction will have a reaction at some point. But the good thing is that we can get them at least tolerant to a small amount. They may never get to the point where they're going to eat a handful of peanuts or 3 Snicker bars, but we can get to the point where somebody by accident put peanut-containing sauce on their food, that just taking a bite may not cause a reaction, and they don't have to be concerned about things that says may contain traces of peanuts or may contain traces of milk. So that's the one type, the oral immunotherapy, where we literally feed them the food. Then the other trials that we are involved in, patch test trials. So we place a patch containing peanut allergen. We know most about that. But then, we're probably going to go towards egg and milk patches as well. So they have the allergen on this patch, which you put on a child's, I think, back or arm. I haven't actually placed them myself. And they wear these for a certain amount of time, and they come back, and we do a challenge to see how much of the food they can tolerate. Now, with the patches in particular, they're never going to get to the point where they will eat the allergen. But the patches can protect them from accidental exposure. So somebody might have contaminated something, and they definitely don't have to then worry about may contain traces anymore. Like I said, the patch trials are mainly, we have good data for the peanut. My boss, Dr. Fleischer, was first author of the paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association about a month ago. But, and of course, with the patches, we have less side effects. So the kids don't tend to have the reactions that they have with the oral immunotherapy. How do you choose which one you want? You spend a good 2 hours with your allergist discussing, your family circumstances. We look at things like how much sport do they do? If you have a kid like mine that spends like 6 hours a day almost in a swimming pool, a patch is perhaps not the best option. So we look at their sport, we look at where do you go on vacation, we look at how dedicated you are. Are you going to give that dose of peanut every time you're supposed to, or are you more suitable for a patch? How scared families are with treating accidental reactions, which we know we will get with the oral immunotherapy, less so with the patch, and also what they want at the end of the day. Do they want the kid to be able to eat 2 peanuts, or are they just concerned about the may contain traces in food? So these are really the things that the allergist can talk to you about, and then families can make an informed decision. But I'd say this is the most exciting thing, other than the early introduction of peanut, is these studies showing us that we can change the immune system. The one trial that I'm very biased, I love the trial, they've done in Australia, where they've given the kids peanut, a graded introduction, plus a probiotic. And actually, really great results. They're now doing a follow-up of the study. So, because again, perhaps there is a place for thinking, can we fix the microbiome and we can fix the allergen intake, and that together perhaps it may have a better and a quicker effect than just feeding a probiotic or just giving them the allergen. So early days, but exciting times. And I really hope that we will get to the point where one day we can help all children to outgrow their allergies to some extent.
I think something that all of that discussion that you just kind of brought out about the trials made me think about, how difficult is it to live with a food allergy? Is it easier now than it was before? Is it just a worry all the time? How complicated is it to live with a food allergy?
That will really depend on the family you talk to. When people say to me, what's the biggest thing you've learned in working in food allergy for the past 20 years, is I say I've learned that every family has to find their comfort zone. And that comfort zone is very different for every family. I have mothers who would literally not go and feed that baby unless I read the labels of 5 products, which I think is safe, and they go home and they feed just those 5 foods for at least 2 weeks. And then so I see them regularly, and it takes us a long time to get their confidence back, to cook again, adapt their recipes. And then I get families where kid would have had a very similar reaction to the one I was just talking about, but the family is not concerned at all. They're very laid back about it. They're not concerned. I think, that it's really up to every family to see how they best want to deal with it. But the standard advice we have to give every family is how to read labels, which foods are safe, which foods are good replacement foods. Give them an epinephrine prescription, teach them how to use it, and also teach extended family and friends if that may be necessary. Just getting back to day-to-day living with food allergy, I'm not sure necessarily if it's getting easier. There's definitely more availability of allergen-free foods and more variety, but I think that also leads to more label checking and to getting a little bit more confused. We had a classic example yesterday where my husband was shopping and the lady couldn't read very well. And she said to my husband that her son is he's got celiac disease, but she sees this is egg pasta. And so can he just read, because she thinks this should be fine because it's made from egg. Well, of course, egg pasta still has the wheat in, so he took her to the aisle where she could find the gluten-free food. So I think the more foods there are and the more new products coming out, in many ways it could get more confusing. But I have to say that there are now, and I don't really want to mention the brands, a number of allergen-free ranges where I can say to my patients, if you go on that website, every single thing you order will be free from all the top 8 allergens. So, and they guarantee that on the website. So for them, at least, there's now some sort of safety haven, which I didn't have 10 years ago. So I think in some ways easier, I think in some ways more difficult. Quite frankly, label reading is a nightmare. Front of pack is not covered by the FALCPA laws. So you can put on the front of pack milk-free, and then on the back it may say contain 2 types of milk proteins, casein and beta-lactoglobulin. Legally, they've done nothing wrong because all that needs to be correct is the information on the ingredient list. What you put on the front of pack is fine. It's not legally binding. So some people may see on a label kosher friendly and think it won't have milk in, or it may say vegan friendly and think there may be no egg or milk in, but if you check the ingredients, it's still in there. Another nightmare is, I can talk about labels forever, is peanut oil. So we say to our patients they can have refined peanut oil, but they can't have the expeller press or the cold pressed peanut oil. But majority of products, when they actually list peanut oil, will not actually say which type it is. So then you have to call their company to find out. So in many ways getting easier, but also still many questions.
Yeah, I didn't realize that a lot of food restaurants use peanut oil to fry, and that can be a huge issue, obviously. But it's that can, but I think again, if it was standard, let's say if all restaurants use the unrefined peanut oil, like the expeller press, then we could just say to our patients, never eat anything in a restaurant that contains peanut oil. But the truth is that the majority of restaurants use the refined peanut oil, which is perfectly okay. But it's more like perhaps when you go to a gourmet restaurant or go to Asian restaurant where they may be using the cold pressed oil. So once again, the patient needs to be detective. And like I say to them, always check, always ask, never put anything in your mouth unless you've checked and you've asked. So that never goes away. So thinking about just the general public or the listeners to this show, what sort of information, how can they use the information we've talked about today in their day-to-day life, whether they're counseling patients or just going about their day?
Okay, so I'll first do prevention, then I'll do management. I think I've summarized prevention. Very little we know about pregnancy, breastfeeding, and early life. When you do meet parents that's still trying to avoid any allergen ever created, then I think you're in a good place to say now, people don't avoid these things anymore. Perhaps you want to go see your allergist or PCP to discuss introduction of allergenic food. I think if you have a friend with a kid with terrible eczema, get them to go see a dermatologist or an allergist, because treating eczema early in life is probably one of the most important things we can do. So that's that. Then in terms of management, I would say if you have a friend or a family member that has an allergy, be aware, know exactly what they need to avoid. Ask them, that's my number one thing I always say, ask them if they avoid things that says may contain traces or produced in a factory. It's a long discussion, but basically every allergist gives different advice and every family makes different decisions. So some people avoid it and some don't, because at least if you then have to buy food for them, you have to which foods to look out for. If you have to cook for somebody with a food allergy, you don't have to sort of like get the sanitizing agency in to come and clean your house. It's just good cleaning, particularly with a household cleaner, can get rid of any allergen. If you've washed your dishes, knives and forks in a washing machine or your dishwashing machine, then that's fine. So just clean your house and remove the allergen so that the person feels safer. If you look after young ones with food allergies, I would say it is highly, highly important to know how to give the epinephrine and to know what symptoms of food allergy looks like. So I'm quite active on Twitter, and one of the tweets that came out yesterday is that we have to understand how young children communicate they're having an allergic reaction. So some children will just start to act out of character. Maybe a very chatty, playful kid that goes and sit in the corner, go very silent all of a sudden. That's huge change in behavior. We need to be aware of that. Sometimes they sort of like scratch in their mouth and try and look like they're trying to pull their tongue out. And they say, this food itches me. So that's another sign that there may be an allergic reaction. So important to talk to the mom and the dad, ask in the past when they've had reaction, how did they present? I think, it's just being mindful that perhaps, especially teenagers, they don't really want to talk about their allergies. Perhaps they're not telling you they're coming for a sleepover and they can't have milk. And when everybody's eating pizza, they may just say, I'm not hungry and not eat. But deep down, they may be absolutely panic-stricken that somebody is going to touch him with the cheese. Some children are concerned to that extent, or they may be concerned about all the pots of yogurt lying around. So I do think it is ask what their comfort zone looks like, and try and behave within that.
I think that's great advice. As far as thinking about the teenagers, because I have a couple teenagers, they just don't want to be different. So they don't want to be called out to be anything different. So
it's interesting. My daughter has a friend with an almond allergy, and for her birthday, they went to like something kitchen, where they all cook their own food. And she particularly chose this place because they're very allergen aware. But this girl repeatedly asked her not to make an announcement about her almond allergy, not to tell everybody that she chose that place because of her allergy. And so teenagers can be very, very sensitive about that. The other thing is we actually had, in the 20 years I lived on the Isle of Wight, we had 2 deaths due to food allergy. But the one was a teenage boy who had a meal from a Chinese restaurant, which he used to order from that chain where he lived, just north of London, came to the Isle of Wight, south of London, thinking the ingredients would be the same. But even though the dish and the chain was the same, it had some peanut in, and he had his girlfriend with him. And when he felt that he started to react, he didn't want her to see him with the hives and the swollen eyes and lips, and he went to hide in the bathroom and died on the way to the hospital. So once again, if you have a teenager you're working with, or even a child with a food allergy, and all of a sudden they just disappear and lock a door, get in there, because they're perhaps just hiding because they don't want people to see them having a reaction.
All right. So the question I always ask my guests at the end is, what's your favorite food? We've talked about a lot of foods. So what is your favorite food?
Oh, spinach.
How do you cook it? Or do you cook it?
No, I think... So I'm South African, and the way that we cook spinach is we cook the spinach with some onion and some potato, and then we mash it all up. If you want to go for the very unhealthy version, you can put a lot of butter in that with a lot of salt and a lot of pepper. But in my house, it would just be the spinach, with the onion and the potato and, a little bit of pepper. But it doesn't mean that I don't like the way my grandmas used to cook it, with way too much salt and butter on top as well. But I think all over, I like healthy, simple food. I like steak, but it again shows my South African heritage. I like a good quality steak as well, and it's good for the iron too.
Great. Well, Carina, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. I know my listeners learned a lot about food allergies and just kind of living with them and what's coming next. So if listeners want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I am on Twitter. My name and last name the wrong way around. So I'm Venter Carina on Twitter, because there is already another Carina Venter. And I also have my own blog, Carina Venter Online. They can email me just by going on the blog. Or, like my kids would say, just Google her, say, Google me. And most academics have their emails, on display on the internet. You're very welcome to email me as well.
Well, guys, this has been another great episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast, the podcast that is all about learning more so you can do more with nutrition in your life. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
You've just listened to an episode of the Nutrition Experts Podcast. Be sure to get more information about this week's episode at www.nutritionexpertspodcast.com. Tune in next time for another great conversation with a nutrition expert and expand your personal knowledge in the field of nutrition, one conversation at a time.